The announcement heard around the world. In the unpredictable world of boxing, where grit and glory intertwine, few announcements could have sparked the kind of fervor that erupted when Mike Tyson and Jake Paul agreed to face each other in the ring. The news broke one balmy evening in Las Vegas, where boxing's elite gathered for an award ceremony. It was Tyson himself who dropped the bombshell, his voice calm but his words electrifying. "Why not?" Tyson said, his eyes gleaming with that same fire that had once terrified opponents. "The kid wants to prove himself. I respect that. And me, I'm always ready for a fight." The world went into overdrive. Social media platforms were flooded with opinions, predictions, and endless memes. Pundits debated the matchup on every sports channel. Some called it a spectacle, a circus act meant for views and money. Others saw it as an intriguing clash of eras, a legend against a rising star with a massive online following. Jake Paul, the internet sensation turned boxer, was no stranger to controversy. Known for his brash personality and relentless self-promotion, Jake thrived on being underestimated. He welcomed the challenge with open arms, declaring, "This isn't just a fight. It's a statement. People think I'm a joke in this sport, but after this fight, they'll call me a legend." The build-up was unlike anything boxing had seen before. Tyson's legacy, built on decades of blood, sweat, and undeniable skill, was the epitome of the sport's golden era. Meanwhile, Jake Paul symbolized a new age of entertainment-driven athletics, where social media clout could launch someone into the ring with legends. The backstory: 2 journeys, 1 ring. Tyson's journey back to the ring began quietly, almost unexpectedly. At 58, he had settled into a life of reflection, business ventures, and podcasting. But beneath the surface, the hunger still simmered. Boxing wasn't just a sport to Tyson, it was his lifeline, his redemption. Over the years, he had overcome insurmountable odds: poverty, incarceration, addiction, and the crushing weight of fame. For Tyson, the fight wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Jake Paul's path couldn't have been more different. Born into an era of smartphones and YouTube, Jake had grown up idolizing athletes like Tyson from afar. His rise to fame had little to do with boxing at first. As a social media influencer, he built a following of millions by pushing boundaries, creating content, and stirring controversy. But beneath the bravado lay a fierce competitor. Jake had ventured into boxing as a way to reinvent himself, surprising even his critics with his dedication and surprising success in the ring. Their collision course seemed both improbable and inevitable. The training camps, preparing for the impossible. As the fight date approached, both men retreated into intense training camps. Tyson's camp was a mix of old-school grit and modern techniques. His team, including longtime trainer Rafael Cordero, focused on sharpening Tyson's legendary power while ensuring his body could endure the grueling demands of the fight. Every punch on the heavy bag sent echoes through the gym, a reminder of the devastating power that had made Tyson a household name. Reporters who managed to sneak glimpses of his training described it as awe-inspiring. "It's like he's turned back the clock," one insider remarked. "He's slower, sure, but that explosiveness is still there." Jake Paul, on the other hand, approached the fight with meticulous precision. He hired top-tier trainers, nutritionists, and even a sports psychologist. "I'm not just fighting Tyson, I'm fighting history," Jake said in an interview. "I know people think I'm crazy, but I've been the underdog my whole life." Videos from Jake's camp showed a different side of him: focused, determined, and willing to push himself beyond his limits. He sparred with fighters much more experienced than him, studying their moves and refining his technique. For Jake, this fight was his Everest, and he was determined to reach the summit. The world watches. As fight night drew closer, the hype reached fever pitch. Tickets sold out within hours, with scalpers charging astronomical prices. Celebrities, athletes, and fans from all walks of life flocked to the event. each with their own reasons for being there. Some wanted to witness Tyson's raw power one last time. Others were curious about whether Jake could back up his endless stream of trash talk. Promotional events added to the drama. At the press conference, the two men faced off for the first time. Tyson, calm and composed, exuded the aura of a predator who had nothing to prove. Jake, bouncing with energy, tried to provoke him with jabs about his age and speed. "You're great, Mike, no doubt," Jake said with a smirk. "But greatness fades. This is my time." Tyson's response was measured but chilling. "Greatness doesn't fade, it evolves." The crowd roared, setting the tone for what would become one of the most talked about fights in boxing history. The stakes beyond the ring. For Tyson, this fight was more than a chance to return to the sport he loved. It was an opportunity to show the world that resilience wasn't tied to age. He had always been a fighter, not just in the ring but in life. Stepping into the ring with Jake Paul wasn't about reclaiming past glory. It was about proving that a fighter's spirit never dies. For Jake, this was his defining moment. He knew the world doubted him, dismissed him as a social media gimmick. But Jake had a point to prove, not just to the critics but to himself. Winning against Tyson would solidify his place in the world of professional boxing, transforming him from a controversial figure into a legitimate athlete. The contrast between the two fighters couldn't have been starker, but in their own ways, both represented the essence of boxing. The drive to overcome, to defy expectations, and to leave everything in the ring. The night before the fight, the city of Las Vegas pulsed with anticipation. Tyson, ever the enigma, spent the evening in quiet reflection. He walked through the casino floor of his hotel, the bright lights and the hum of slot machines, a stark contrast to the battle that awaited him. Fans approached him for autographs and selfies, their reverence palpable. Tyson obliged, his demeanor calm and collected. Jake, on the other hand, was surrounded by his team, his family, and the ever-present hum of social media. He live-streamed parts of his evening, giving his fans a glimpse of his pre-fight routine. But behind the bravado, Jake's nerves were undeniable. "This is it," he told his brother Logan. "Win or lose, this is the fight of my life." As the clock struck midnight, both fighters prepared to face the challenge of a lifetime. Tyson, the indomitable force of the past, and Jake, the unrelenting ambition of the present, were on a collision course that would captivate the world. The stage was set for a battle that would transcend the boundaries of sport, becoming a story of legacy, determination, and the enduring spirit of the fighter. The ring of destiny. The night had arrived. The air in Las Vegas felt electric, as if the city itself knew that something historic was about to unfold. The venue, an opulent stadium that had seen its share of iconic battles, was packed to the brim. Every seat was taken, every corner filled with fans, journalists, and celebrities eager to witness the spectacle. The cameras flashed as the crowd buzzed with anticipation. This was not just another fight. It was a cultural event. The undercard fights, though exciting, were merely preludes to the main event. Each victory and knockout only added to the crowd's restlessness. They weren't here for rising prospects or regional champions. They were here for the ultimate clash of generations, Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. Two names, worlds apart, yet bound by the magnetic force of boxing. The walk to the ring. The moment finally came. The announcer's booming voice filled the arena, signaling the start of the main event. First to walk out was Jake Paul. Dressed in a dazzling red and gold robe adorned with his signature, Problem Child branding, Jake emerged to a deafening mix of cheers and boos. His entourage surrounded him, hyping him up as he made his way down the aisle. Jake smiled confidently, soaking in the energy of the crowd. Yet beneath the bravado, his mind raced. "This is your moment," he repeated to himself. "Focus. Stay sharp." As Jake climbed into the ring, he bounced lightly on his feet, his face a mask of determination. He glanced at the massive crowd, scanning for familiar faces. His brother Logan, his parents, and even his childhood friends were in attendance. The stakes had never felt higher. Then the lights dimmed, and a new energy swept through the arena. A voice that needed no introduction echoed through the stadium. "Iron Mike Tyson." The crowd erupted in a thunderous roar as Tyson stepped into view, dressed in a simple black robe with white trim, a nod to his prime years. Tyson looked every bit the living legend. His expression was calm, his eyes focused, his demeanor almost unnervingly composed. The contrast between the two fighters was stark. Jake, vibrant and flamboyant, seemed to carry the exuberance of youth. Tyson, silent and stoic, exuded an aura of unshakable confidence. As Tyson approached the ring, the crowd chanted his name, their voices rising like a wave. This was more than nostalgia. It was reverence. The face-off. Inside the ring, the tension was palpable. The two fighters stood in their corners, their teams giving final instructions. The referee called them to the center, and the crowd fell silent. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Jake stood tall, his youthful energy radiating as he met Tyson's gaze. But Tyson's eyes, those cold, predatory eyes, seemed to pierce through him. It wasn't intimidation exactly, but the sheer weight of Tyson's presence was overwhelming. "You ready, kid?" Tyson asked, his voice low but steady. Jake nodded, his confidence unshaken. "Born ready." The referee went through the standard instructions, but neither fighter seemed to hear. Their focus was locked entirely on each other. When the referee told them to touch gloves, Tyson extended his hand first. Jake hesitated for a fraction of a second before reciprocating. The crowd roared as they returned to their corners. The opening bell. The first round began with a sharp clang of the bell. The fighters approached each other cautiously, Tyson with measured steps, and Jake bouncing lightly on his toes. The energy in the arena was electric, every move scrutinized by the thousands in attendance and millions watching from around the world. Tyson's movements were deliberate, his eyes scanning Jake's every motion. He threw a few testing jabs, each one precise but restrained. Jake, visibly faster on his feet, danced around the ring, probing Tyson's defenses with quick, light punches. The crowd leaned forward, holding their breath with every exchange. Jake's early strategy was clear: stay mobile, avoid Tyson's power, and rack up points with speed and accuracy. Tyson, however, was unbothered. His patience was unnerving. Each step forward felt like a lion stalking its prey. Halfway through the round, Jake attempted a bold combination. 2 jabs followed by a right cross. The punches landed, but they seemed to have little effect on Tyson, who absorbed them without flinching. Then, in a flash, Tyson countered with a left hook that narrowly missed Jake's head. The crowd gasped, the power of the swing evident even in its miss. Jake smirked, raising his gloves in mock bravado, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. That punch had been a warning. The battle begins. As the rounds progressed, the pace intensified. By the second round, Jake was beginning to find his rhythm. His footwork was sharp, his jabs landing with increasing frequency. The younger fighter was clearly gaining confidence, using his agility to stay just out of Tyson's reach. But Tyson wasn't idle. He was calculating, studying Jake's patterns. And then, like a storm breaking, he struck. A thunderous right hook crashed into Jake's midsection, forcing the younger fighter to stumble backward. The crowd erupted as Tyson pressed forward, his punches coming in devastating combinations. Jake covered up, absorbing the blows as best he could. The bell rang, signaling the end of the round, but the message was clear. Tyson wasn't here to play games. The psychological war. By the third round, the fight had shifted into a mental battle, as much as a physical one. Jake's strategy was to frustrate Tyson with movement and speed, but Tyson's relentless pressure began to wear on him. Every time Jake landed a punch, Tyson responded with a heavier, more punishing blow. The psychological edge was evident in Tyson's demeanor. He rarely smiled, but his expression carried a quiet confidence. Jake, in contrast, seemed to be fighting to prove something. to himself, to the crowd, to the world. During a brief clinch in the middle of the round, Tyson leaned in close and whispered something to Jake. No one could hear what was said, but Jake's eyes widened slightly. It was as if Tyson had reached into his mind, planting seeds of doubt. The unexpected turn. As the fourth round began, the unthinkable happened. Tyson, while maneuvering to throw a hook, appeared to stumble slightly. The crowd collectively held their breath. Was this a sign of his age catching up to him? Jake seized the moment, launching a flurry of punches that connected cleanly. The crowd roared as Tyson backed up, seemingly shaken. But then, just as suddenly, Tyson smiled. A small, knowing grin. It was a trap. With lightning speed, he unleashed a devastating uppercut that sent Jake stumbling backward. The crowd went wild as Jake barely managed to stay on his feet. The bell rang, and Jake returned to his corner, visibly shaken. Tyson, however, looked as composed as ever, his demeanor that of a predator who had merely toyed with his prey. The stakes grow higher. By the end of the fourth round, the fight had become more than a contest of skill. It was a war of wills. Both fighters bore the marks of battle, sweat pouring down their faces, their bodies bruised and battered. Yet neither was willing to back down. As the arena thundered with cheers, the world held its breath. The fight was far from over, and the best was yet to come. The unfolding storm. The fifth round began with an intensity that left the crowd at the edge of their seats. The earlier rounds had been a measured clash of skill, but now the fight had evolved into a true battle of attrition. Both fighters bore the weight of every punch, every feint, every misstep. The stakes felt larger than life. This wasn't just about victory, it was about legacy. Tyson's relentless pursuit. Mike Tyson, now fully locked into his rhythm, became a different beast. Gone was the cautious approach of the earlier rounds. He advanced with the unrelenting determination that had defined his prime, his punches carrying the weight of decades of experience and raw power. Jake Paul, still quick on his feet, used every ounce of his youthful agility to keep Tyson at bay. He danced around the ring, landing quick jabs that snapped Tyson's head back, but the force behind them lacked the devastation needed to slow the legend. Tyson, however, was no longer interested in playing the chess game. With each calculated step forward, he cornered Jake against the ropes, his eyes blazing with intensity. A ferocious body shot landed, the sound echoing through the arena. Jake winced, his guard momentarily dropping, and Tyson seized the opportunity. A left hook smashed into Jake's ribs, followed by an uppercut that narrowly missed his chin as Jake ducked at the last second. The crowd roared in awe at the relentless attack, many on their feet, unable to contain their excitement. Jake's moment of defiance. But Jake Paul was not ready to fold. For all the criticism he had faced throughout his boxing journey, one thing could not be denied. He had heart, grit, determination. As Tyson pressed him harder, Jake dug deep into reserves of energy and resilience he hadn't even known he possessed. With Tyson closing in, Jake unleashed a flurry of punches, each one faster and sharper than the last. His gloves snapped against Tyson's face, landing a clean combination that sent sweat flying. The crowd erupted as Jake, for the first time in the fight, managed to back Tyson up. Emboldened, Jake pressed forward, using his speed and footwork to his advantage. He circled Tyson, landing jabs and hooks while avoiding the devastating counterpunches that had haunted him earlier. The younger fighter's confidence grew with every landed punch, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though he might actually turn the tide. A test of endurance. The fifth round ended with both fighters visibly drained but still standing. Jake returned to his corner, his chest heaving as his trainer spoke rapidly, urging him to stay focused. Across the ring, Tyson sat on his stool, his face calm but his breathing heavy. His trainer leaned in, whispering words of encouragement as the cutman worked on a small gash over Tyson's right eyebrow. The crowd was electric, sensing the shift in momentum. Jake's fans cheered loudly, their faith in the young fighter renewed. Tyson's loyal supporters countered with chants of "Iron Mike." The atmosphere was alive with tension and excitement, a perfect reflection of the battle unfolding in the ring. The turning point. As the sixth round began, the fighters met in the center of the ring with a renewed sense of purpose. The pace slowed slightly, both men cautious now, aware that one mistake could spell disaster. Jake used his reach advantage to keep Tyson at a distance, flicking out jabs and moving laterally to avoid being trapped. But Tyson wasn't fooled. He watched Jake closely, his sharp eyes studying every movement. He began to feint, drawing Jake into throwing punches that left him open for counters. A particularly brutal exchange saw Tyson duck under Jake's right cross and land a devastating hook to the body that sent Jake stumbling back. The crowd gasped as Jake clutched his side, the pain visible on his face. Tyson moved in for the kill, his punches coming in a barrage of calculated devastation. Jake covered up, his back against the ropes, but Tyson's relentless pressure left no room for escape. And then, in a moment that stunned everyone, Jake spun off the ropes, using Tyson's momentum against him. A quick uppercut followed by a clean jab to Tyson's chin sent the older fighter reeling momentarily. The crowd erupted as Jake roared in defiance, rallying himself for another push. Tyson's veteran instincts. But Tyson was no stranger to adversity. His career had been defined by moments like this, where the tide seemed to turn against him, only for him to rise stronger. He steadied himself, his expression unreadable as he circled Jake. His movements were slower now, but every step carried purpose. Jake, sensing an opportunity, pressed forward, throwing combinations with renewed energy. But Tyson's defense held firm, his gloves absorbing the brunt of the blows. Then, like a lightning strike, Tyson unleashed a counter right hook that landed flush on Jake's temple. Jake stumbled, his legs buckling slightly, but he managed to stay upright. The crowd was on its feet, the energy in the arena reaching a fever pitch. Tyson followed up with a series of body shots, each one driving the air out of Jake's lungs. The younger fighter was visibly fatigued, his movements less crisp, but he refused to fall. The clash of wills. By the end of the sixth round, it was clear that this fight was no ordinary match. It was a war, a battle of wills between two men from vastly different worlds, each refusing to give an inch. Tyson returned to his corner, his body bearing the marks of battle, but his spirit unbroken. Across the ring, Jake sat slumped on his stool, his chest heaving as his team frantically worked to keep him in the fight. The younger fighter's face was a mixture of pain and determination. As the bell signaled the start of the seventh round, the crowd roared in anticipation. This was the fight they had come to see. A clash of generations, a test of endurance, and a testament to the indomitable human spirit. Tyson, the battle-hardened warrior, and Jake, the audacious upstart, had given everything they had. But as they stood across from each other, the fight was far from over. Each man knew that the next rounds would define not just the outcome of the fight, but the legacy they would leave behind. The depths of resolve. The seventh round began with a tension that was nearly tangible. The crowd, already hoarse from roaring at every punch, grew quieter, leaning into the unfolding drama. This was no longer just a fight. It was a saga of human spirit, a story of two men pushing beyond their limits, defying every expectation. Both fighters stepped toward each other with heavy legs, their bodies battered but their eyes still sharp. This was the point in the fight where strategy began to blur with survival, where instincts took over from meticulous planning. They were deep in the trenches now, and only one of them would emerge victorious. Tyson's tactical brilliance. Mike Tyson, the seasoned warrior, knew the rhythm of a fight like no other. He could feel the ebb and flow, the subtle shifts in momentum. He also understood the advantage of experience, of reading not just the movements but the intentions of his opponent. He began to employ a tactic that had served him well throughout his career. Baiting. Tyson feinted with his left, drawing Jake Paul in. As Jake stepped forward, Tyson pivoted, sending a crushing body shot into Jake's ribs. Jake grimaced, but kept his guard up, retaliating with a quick jab that grazed Tyson's cheek. The veteran smiled, a small, almost imperceptible grin that carried years of wisdom and menace. Tyson pressed forward again, throwing combinations that forced Jake to retreat. A jab, a hook, another jab, all designed to keep Jake off balance. But Tyson wasn't just throwing punches. He was setting traps, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash his devastating power. Jake's determination. Jake Paul, for all his inexperience compared to Tyson, had something equally important: heart. He had trained for this moment not just physically but mentally, preparing himself to face the onslaught of a living legend. And as Tyson pressed him harder, Jake's resolve only grew stronger. Jake began to use his footwork more effectively, circling away from Tyson's power hand. He kept his jab active, snapping it out to create space and disrupt Tyson's rhythm. With each punch, Jake's confidence grew. He knew he couldn't match Tyson's power, but he could outwork him, make him chase, and force mistakes. In the middle of the round, Jake landed a clean 1-2 combination, his gloves thudding against Tyson's head. The crowd erupted, sensing that the younger fighter was finding his groove. But Tyson, ever the predator, shook off the blows and pressed forward, his eyes locked on Jake like a lion stalking prey. The first knockdown. And then it happened. In the final minute of the 7th round, Tyson unleashed a devastating right hook that found its mark. The punch connected with Jake's jaw, and the sound echoed through the arena. Jake's legs buckled, and he stumbled backward, his arms flailing as he tried to keep his balance. But gravity won, and he hit the canvas with a heavy thud. The crowd exploded in a deafening roar as Tyson stood over Jake, his chest heaving, his expression calm but intense. The referee immediately stepped in, waving Tyson to a neutral corner as he began the count. Jake lay on his back for a moment, blinking up at the bright lights above him. The arena seemed to spin, the roar of the crowd fading into a distant hum. But somewhere deep inside him, a voice called out, a voice that refused to let him stay down. 1, 2. The referee counted. Jake rolled onto his side, his gloved hands pressing against the canvas. His body screamed in protest, but his mind willed him forward. By the time the referee reached 8, Jake was on his feet, his gloves raised to show he was ready to continue. The referee looked him in the eyes, checking for signs of clarity. "You good?" he asked. Jake nodded, his jaw set. "Let's go." The resurgence. As the fight resumed, Tyson wasted no time. He charged forward, throwing a barrage of punches aimed at ending the fight. But Jake, fueled by sheer willpower, managed to weather the storm. He ducked, slipped, and clinched, using every trick he'd learned to survive. The bell rang, signaling the end of the 7th round, and the crowd erupted in applause. Jake staggered back to his corner, his face swollen, his breathing labored. His trainer immediately got to work, applying ice packs and offering words of encouragement. "You've got this, Jake," his trainer said, his voice firm. "Stay focused. He's tiring. Just keep moving, keep working the jab." Across the ring, Tyson sat calmly, his demeanor as unshakable as ever. His trainer leaned in, wiping sweat from his face. "He's tougher than we thought," the trainer admitted. Tyson simply nodded, his gaze never leaving Jake. The 8th round. A shift in momentum. The 8th round began with a surprising twist. Tyson, though still powerful, was beginning to show signs of fatigue. His punches were slightly slower, his movements less sharp. Jake, sensing the shift, began to take more risks. Jake's footwork became more dynamic, his jabs more frequent. He landed a solid uppercut that snapped Tyson's head back, drawing gasps from the crowd. For the first time in the fight, it was Tyson who looked vulnerable. But the legend wasn't done. Tyson retaliated with a series of body shots that left Jake gasping for air. The two fighters exchanged blows in the center of the ring, their gloves colliding in a symphony of brutality. The crowd was on its feet, their cheers blending into a chaotic roar. By the end of the round, both men were visibly exhausted, their bodies drenched in sweat, their faces marked by the battle. The fight had reached a level of intensity that few could have anticipated. A battle of wills. The ninth round was a testament to the human spirit. Tyson, the seasoned veteran, refused to give in despite his fatigue. Jake, the young upstart, fought with the determination of a man who had everything to prove. Every punch, every step, every breath was a battle in itself. The crowd, now fully invested, cheered for both fighters. It was no longer about picking sides. It was about witnessing greatness. Tyson and Jake, two men from different worlds, had come together to create a moment that transcended the sport. As the round ended, the fighters returned to their corners, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. The crowd erupted into chants of Tyson, Jake, as the announcer declared the final round was about to begin. This was it, the culmination of their journey, the moment that would define their legacies. Both men knew that the 10th round would be their last chance to leave it all in the ring. The crowd held its breath. The fighters stood tall, and the bell rang. The final chapter was about to unfold. The final stand. The bell signaling the start of the 10th and final round reverberated through the packed arena, silencing the roaring crowd. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause. Mike Tyson, the living legend, and Jake Paul, the determined underdog, stood in their corners, staring at each other with unrelenting focus. Both men bore the marks of war, swollen faces, bruised ribs, and bloody brows. Their bodies screamed for relief, but their spirits refused to yield. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It had transcended sport and become a raw, visceral display of human willpower. The crowd, no longer divided, erupted into chants of, "Let's go, Mike," and "Jake, Jake." Their voices merged into a deafening roar, a unified acknowledgement of the greatness they were witnessing. The first clash. As the fighters approached each other, the energy in the arena was electric. Tyson moved with a deliberate, predatory grace, his eyes scanning Jake for any sign of weakness. Jake, despite his battered condition, bounced lightly on his toes, his youthful energy refusing to let him crumble. Tyson threw the first punch, a lightning-fast jab that Jake narrowly dodged. The younger fighter retaliated with a quick combination, his gloves snapping against Tyson's high guard. The crowd cheered as Jake moved with surprising agility, landing a clean jab to Tyson's face. But Tyson was far from finished. With a growl of determination, he unleashed a powerful body shot that landed squarely on Jake's ribs. Jake staggered backward, his face contorting in pain, but he stayed on his feet. Tyson pressed forward, throwing a series of hooks that forced Jake to retreat toward the ropes. The sound of leather meeting flesh echoed through the arena as Tyson's punches landed with brutal force. Jake covered up, absorbing the onslaught, his back against the ropes. The crowd roared, sensing that Tyson might be on the verge of a knockout. Jake's fight for survival. Just when it seemed like the fight might be over, Jake rallied. He ducked under a devastating right hook from Tyson and slipped out of the corner, creating distance between them. The crowd erupted as Jake, now visibly exhausted but defiant, began to fight back. Jake threw a flurry of punches, his gloves a blur as they connected with Tyson's torso and chin. Each punch was a declaration of his refusal to give up, a testament to the hours he'd spent training, pushing himself to the brink. His combinations were sharp, his movements fluid, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though he might turn the tide. Tyson, ever the veteran, absorbed the punches with a stoic expression. He waited for his moment, his movements calculated. As Jake stepped in to throw another punch, Tyson countered with a devastating uppercut that sent Jake stumbling backward. The crowd gasped as Jake's legs wobbled, but somehow he stayed upright. The turning point. Midway through the round, the fight reached a fever pitch. Both men were exhausted, their bodies moving more out of instinct than strategy. Tyson, his breathing heavy, began to rely on short, powerful bursts of offense, throwing hooks and uppercuts with deadly precision. Jake, battered but resilient, used his footwork to stay out of Tyson's range, throwing quick jabs and counters whenever he found an opening. Then came the moment that would be replayed for years to come. Tyson, stalking Jake with relentless pressure, threw a massive right hook aimed at Jake's jaw. But Jake, anticipating the move, ducked at the last second and countered with a straight right hand that landed flush on Tyson's chin. The impact was thunderous. Tyson staggered, his knees buckling slightly, and the crowd erupted into a deafening roar. Jake, sensing an opportunity, pressed forward, throwing a series of punches that forced Tyson to backpedal for the first time in the fight. A clash of wills. But Tyson wasn't done. Summoning every ounce of strength he had left, the former heavyweight champion steadied himself and launched a furious counterattack. His punches came with the force of a man determined to finish the fight on his terms. A devastating left hook landed on Jake's temple, sending him stumbling toward the ropes. The two fighters, now visibly drained, stood toe-to-toe in the center of the ring, trading punches with reckless abandon. The crowd was on its feet, their cheers blending into a cacophony of excitement and awe. Every punch felt like a lifetime of effort, every exchange a testament to their unbreakable spirits. Jake landed a clean jab, snapping Tyson's head back. Tyson retaliated with a crushing body shot that made Jake wince in pain. Neither man would back down, their sheer determination keeping them standing as the seconds ticked away. The final moments. With less than 30 seconds left in the round, both fighters unleashed everything they had left. Jake, his face a mask of exhaustion and resolve, threw a flurry of punches, landing a clean combination to Tyson's ribs and chin. Tyson, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, responded with a thunderous right hook that sent Jake reeling. The bell rang, signaling the end of the fight. Both men staggered backward, their bodies on the verge of collapse. The crowd erupted into a standing ovation, their cheers echoing through the arena as the fighters embraced the moment. Tyson and Jake, two warriors who had given everything, stood in their corners, awaiting the final decision. The judge's decision. The referee called the fighters to the center of the ring. The announcer, holding the scorecards, stepped forward. The crowd fell silent, the tension palpable. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer began, his voice booming through the arena. "After 10 rounds of intense, unforgettable action, we go to the judges' scorecards." The pause that followed felt like an eternity. Judge 1 scores the bout 96-94 for Paul. Judge 2 scores the bout 95-95, a draw. Judge 3 scores the bout 97-93 for your winner by majority decision. The crowd held its breath. Jake the problem child, Paul. The arena erupted into a mixture of cheers and gasps. Jake fell to his knees, his hands covering his face in disbelief. His team rushed into the ring, lifting him onto their shoulders as the crowd roared. The aftermath. Tyson, his face bruised but his spirit unbroken, approached Jake. He extended his hand, a gesture of respect that carried more weight than any words could. Jake, still overcome with emotion, shook Tyson's hand and hugged him. "You've got heart, kid," Tyson said, his voice warm but firm. "You earned this." Jake, his voice shaky, responded, "You're the reason I started. Thank you for everything." The two men, united by their shared respect, stood side by side as the crowd chanted their names. In that moment, it didn't matter who had won or lost. They had both given the world a fight that would be remembered for generations. As the lights dimmed and the fighters left the ring, the echoes of their battle lingered in the air. This was more than a fight. It was a story of grit, determination, and the unyielding human spirit. Legacy forged in blood and sweat. As the crowd slowly filtered out of the arena, the echoes of the monumental fight between Mike Tyson and Jake Paul lingered in the air like a tangible force. The night had delivered everything the fans had hoped for and more. A clash not just of fists, but of philosophies, eras, and identities. But for the two fighters, their journey didn't end with the final bell. What came next would redefine not just their careers, but the sport of boxing itself. The emotional aftermath. Back in their respective locker rooms, the atmosphere was thick with emotion. For Jake Paul, the enormity of what he had just accomplished was still sinking in. Surrounded by his team, family, and close friends, he sat on the bench, his head in his hands. The adrenaline was fading, and with it came the overwhelming weight of the experience. Logan Paul, Jake's brother, knelt beside him, a proud grin on his face. "You did it, bro," Logan said, his voice steady despite the emotion. "You proved them all wrong." Jake looked up, his face battered but radiant with a mixture of relief and pride. "I didn't think I'd make it to the final bell," he admitted. "Every punch he threw felt like a freight train. That man's a monster." In the opposing locker room, Mike Tyson sat quietly, a towel draped over his head. His team worked around him, patching up the cuts on his face and tending to his swollen hands. Despite the loss on the scorecards, Tyson felt no bitterness. Instead, there was a profound sense of peace. He had given everything, and in doing so, he had reconnected with the fighter he once was. "Good fight, Mike," his trainer said, patting him on the shoulder. "You showed the world that the lion still roars." Tyson smiled faintly, his gaze distant. "That kid's got something," he murmured. "He's not just height. He's got the heart of a fighter." The press conference. The post-fight press conference was a spectacle in itself. Journalists packed the room, their cameras flashing as Jake and Tyson entered, their bodies still bearing the marks of their grueling battle. They took their seats, Jake's team on one side and Tyson's on the other. The atmosphere was charged with mutual respect. The first question was directed at Jake. "Jake, this was the fight of your life. What does this victory mean to you?" Jake leaned into the microphone, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "It means everything," he said. "I grew up watching Mike Tyson. He's the reason I even thought about stepping into the ring. To share the ring with him, to stand toe-to-toe with a legend, it's the greatest honor of my life." The room broke into applause, a rare moment of unity in the often divisive world of boxing. When the mic was passed to Tyson, the room fell silent. Everyone wanted to hear what the former heavyweight champion had to say. "Mike, what's next for you after this fight?" a journalist asked. Tyson's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. "I don't know about next," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "But tonight, I felt alive. That's what this sport does. It makes you feel alive." He turned to Jake, his expression softening. "This kid here, he's got guts. He's got what it takes to go far. Tonight wasn't about winning or losing. It was about showing the world what boxing is really about: heart, respect, and the love of the fight." The crowd erupted into applause once again. It was a moment that transcended the usual sound bites of a post-fight interview. It was real, raw, and unforgettable. The world reacts. The fight's impact rippled far beyond the walls of the arena. Social media exploded with reactions, trending hashtags, and viral clips. The highlight reels of Tyson's devastating hooks and Jake's relentless combinations dominated every platform. Fans, celebrities, and fellow athletes weighed in, praising both fighters for their courage and determination. Legendary boxers like Evander Holyfield and Floyd Mayweather offered their takes. "That was one for the history books," Holyfield tweeted. "Respect to both warriors." Mayweather, ever the showman, posted a video praising Tyson's performance while hinting at a possible exhibition fight against him in the future. Jake Paul's victory, though controversial to some, marked a turning point in his career. Critics who had dismissed him as a gimmick were forced to acknowledge his growth as a boxer. For Tyson, the fight cemented his status as not just a legend of the sport, but as a timeless symbol of resilience and determination. Reflections and new paths. In the weeks that followed, Both fighters took time to reflect on what the fight meant for their respective journeys. For Jake, it was a moment of validation, but also a wake-up call. The grueling fight had exposed his weaknesses, and he was determined to address them. Jake announced plans to take a break from fighting to focus on honing his skills. He pledged to train with some of the best in the business, seeking to prove that his victory over Tyson was not a fluke but the beginning of a new chapter. For Tyson, the fight was a revelation. He had stepped into the ring not knowing what to expect, but had emerged with a renewed sense of purpose. "I thought I was done with boxing," he said in an interview, "but this fight showed me that I still got something left to give." Tyson began to explore opportunities to mentor young fighters, sharing the lessons he had learned over his storied career. He also hinted at a possible return to the ring, not for glory, but for the sheer love of the sport. The legacy of the fight. Months later, the fight was still the topic of conversation in boxing circles. It was hailed as a landmark event, a rare moment when two fighters from vastly different worlds came together to create something unforgettable. Analysts dissected every round, every punch, drawing lessons and insights that would be studied for years. Documentaries were made, books were written, and the fight became a cultural touchstone. It wasn't just about who won or lost. It was about the stories behind the fighters, the challenges they faced, and the courage it took to step into the ring. For Tyson, the fight reinforced his legacy as a fearless warrior who never backed down from a challenge. For Jake, it was the moment he silenced his doubters and proved that he belonged in the world of professional boxing. A night that will never be forgotten. Years later, when fans and historians looked back on that fateful night, they didn't just see a fight. They saw two men who embodied the essence of boxing: resilience, passion, and an unrelenting will to overcome. Tyson, the indomitable legend, and Jake, the brash upstart turned warrior, had given the world a story that would be remembered for generations. And as the lights dimmed in the arena that night, leaving behind only the echoes of cheers and the memories of an unforgettable battle, one thing was clear: this fight wasn't just about boxing. It was about life, its struggles, its triumphs, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. The aftermath of legends. The fight between Mike Tyson and Jake Paul was over, but its ripples were only beginning to spread. The bout had etched itself into the annals of boxing history, and the world continued to buzz with analysis, admiration, and debate. For Tyson and Jake, however, life after their unforgettable clash proved to be as transformative as the fight itself. Both men found themselves at the center of a narrative far larger than the sport, one that would redefine their legacies and inspire millions. The rise of Jake Paul. Redemption and respect. The morning after his victory, Jake Paul woke up to an entirely new world. Headlines screamed his name, not as a social media star, but as a legitimate contender in the boxing world. Pundits who had once dismissed him as a sideshow now praised his grit, his heart, and his ability to survive 10 rounds against one of the greatest fighters in history. Jake, however, wasn't basking in the glory. As he sat in his Los Angeles home overlooking the city, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The fight had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated. "Tyson didn't just test my skills," Jake admitted in a live stream with his fans. "He tested my soul." That fight was about more than boxing. It was about proving to myself that I could stand in the fire and not burn. Jake took a few months off from the spotlight, spending his time training in silence and traveling. He visited iconic boxing gyms across the world, seeking wisdom from veterans of the sport. In Mexico, he sparred with local fighters, honing his technique. In the Philippines, he trained in the shadow of Manny Pacquiao, absorbing lessons about humility and discipline. When Jake finally returned to the public eye, it was with a renewed sense of purpose. He announced a new initiative to promote boxing among underprivileged youth. Partnering with gyms across the country, Jake funded programs that provided free training, mentorship, and resources to aspiring fighters who couldn't afford them. "Boxing gave me a second chance at life," Jake said at the program's launch. Now I want to give others that same opportunity. Mike Tyson's new mission, the mentor's wisdom. For Mike Tyson, the fight was more than just another chapter in his storied career. It was a moment of clarity, a reminder of the fire that still burned within him, not just as a fighter, but as a teacher and leader. That fight with Jake showed me something, Tyson said in an interview. It reminded me why I fell in love with boxing in the first place. It's not about fame or money. It's about the fight, inside and outside the ring. Tyson began to focus on mentoring the next generation of fighters. He established the Tyson Legacy Academy, a training facility dedicated to teaching not just the technical aspects of boxing, but the mental and emotional resilience it demands. The academy, housed in a state-of-the-art facility in Nevada, quickly became a mecca for aspiring boxers from around the globe. But Tyson's influence wasn't confined to the gym. He started speaking at schools, community centers, and rehabilitation programs, sharing his life story with brutal honesty. He spoke about his struggles with fame, addiction, and loss, and how boxing had been both his salvation and his challenge. "I've been to the bottom and back," Tyson often said. "If I can stand up again, so can you." His speeches resonated deeply, particularly with young men and women searching for direction. Tyson's raw honesty and unfiltered wisdom turned him into an unlikely motivational figure, someone who could connect with people from all walks of life. The boxing world reacts. The fight also had a profound impact on the sport itself. For years, boxing had been criticized for losing its luster, overshadowed by the rise of mixed martial arts and the spectacle of celebrity exhibition matches. But the Tyson-Paul fight reignited a passion for the sweet science, reminding fans and fighters alike of the sport's timeless appeal. Promoters began organizing more cross-generational fights, pairing rising stars with seasoned legends in a bid to create similarly compelling narratives. The concept wasn't without its critics. Some argued that it risked exploiting older fighters. But the success of Tyson and Paul's fight proved that, when done respectfully, it could create magic. Young boxers, inspired by Jake's journey, began to see him as a role model. For all his brashness and antics, Jake had shown that hard work, dedication, and a willingness to face challenges head-on could change the narrative. Meanwhile, Tyson's mentorship reignited the careers of several veteran fighters, many of whom had struggled to find purpose after retiring from the ring. A meeting of minds. Months after their fight, Jake and Tyson reunited at an event in New York City. The occasion was the launch of a documentary chronicling their iconic bout, aptly titled Iron and Fire. The film, produced by a collaboration between Jake's media company and a renowned documentary filmmaker, delved deep into their lives, training camps, and the night that brought them together. At the premiere, Tyson and Jake sat side by side, their camaraderie evident. During a panel discussion, Tyson was asked how he felt about Jake's rapid rise in boxing. Tyson chuckled. "You know, when I first heard Jake's name, I thought, who is this kid? What's he doing in my sport? But after that fight, I saw something in him, something real. He's got heart, and that's something you can't teach." Jake, visibly moved, responded with gratitude. "Mike's a legend for a reason. Stepping into the ring with him wasn't just a fight. It was a masterclass in what it means to be a warrior." The legacy of the fight. In the years that followed, the Tyson-Paul fight came to be regarded as a pivotal moment in boxing history. It was more than a clash of generations. It was a reminder of the sport's ability to bring people together, to inspire and uplift, to transcend the physical and tap into something deeply human. Statues commemorating the fight were erected in both Las Vegas and Cleveland, Jake's hometown. The plaques beneath them read, "In honor of two warriors who reminded the world that the spirit of boxing is the spirit of life. Unyielding, fearless, and full of heart." Tyson continued to build his legacy as a mentor and motivator, while Jake went on to fight some of the biggest names in boxing, solidifying his place in the sport. Despite their busy lives, the two remained close, bound by the night they shared in the ring. a night remembered forever. Decades later, long after both men had retired, the fight was still talked about in reverent tones. Sports historians cited it as a turning point in boxing, a moment that bridged the past and the future. Fans who had witnessed it live spoke of the electricity in the air, the courage on display, and the mutual respect that defined the night. For Tyson and Jake, it was more than a memory. It was a testament to their journeys, their struggles, and their triumphs. It was proof that no matter where you come from or what you faced, there's always a fight worth fighting and a legacy worth leaving behind.